Guys, I woke up Monday morning and I didn't really know what to do with myself. The Oscars were over. The awards season was over. What do I do? Well, talk about awards season. What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to The Garage. Gerald here with you, of course. You guys have been with me all award season. And like I said in my cold open, the Academy Awards were this past Sunday night, which symbolizes the end of another frankly long season that we have, featuring a ton of awards, a ton of great films, and the accolades that we rain down upon them. This is not so much going to be a recap of award season, but what I'm going to do every year after award season ends and after the Oscars have aired and the awards have all been given out, the mysteries have all been solved, I'm going to give you my top 3 and my bottom 3 moments from award season. This can be anything from a win that really affected me, a campaign, a speech, a omission. Anything can go into these top 3s. And it's really just based on my personal preference. It's things that affected me personally. Some of these things that might be on my bottom 3 may have been a highlight for you. Or if they're my top 3, maybe you hated them. That's okay. Award season affects us all in different ways. Following it as closely as I do for about 3 to 4 months every year, I do get to a point where I want it to be over and I want to get back to movie watching for the new year, which in this case would be 2025, and start thinking about next year's award season. This video today is going to be, I was going to say my last video for the 2025 award season, but that might not be true because I'm doing a podcast episode where me and a special guest are going to wrap up the Oscar ceremony. So that technically will be the last thing on the channel, so I didn't want to lie to you. But in terms of a long-form content video that I'm editing together, this will be the last one. And again, I'm going to be focusing on my top 3 and my bottom 3 moments from this award season. These are in no particular order. I'm going to start with the bottom 3. So these are the 3 things that irked me the most or that I disliked more than anything else that I ran across this award season. And again, this is just me personally. There may be something in my bottom 3 that you actually really appreciated and enjoyed, and that's completely fine. I do want to hear about it down in the comments. Please let me know what your favorite or your top 3 things from award season were. I would love to know because I went through my mind trying to come up with a list, and I'm sure I forgot some things. So I would love to hear yours too. Hit me down in the comments. Again, in no particular order, the first thing I'm going to mention for my bottom 3 or my least liked things from award season is the continued category fraud that has gotten more and more egregious year after year, particularly from the Academy. Now, category fraud has existed for multiple years across multiple awards bodies. The Academy is usually shined most in the spotlight because that's obviously the most prestigious award that everybody's kind of vying for. Whether they're competing for the SAG or the Critics' Choice, at the end of the day, everybody's kind of running to the finish line, which is the Academy Awards. You can find examples of it scattered throughout most years if you look at Oscars history, and if you know film, you can see a name that may have been nominated in a given year. You could just grab a random year and you could look at it and you could say that person was nominated for supporting actor for that film. This year, it was multiplied in my opinion because when it really dawned on me is when they did that group photo of the 4 major acting wins at the Academy Awards this year. And all 4 of those actors got together and took a group photo on the red carpet with holding their Oscars, which, by the way, congratulations to all those performances, all 4 of which I picked, by the way. But I'm looking at it and I'm going, those are the 4 lead performances in those movies. So the 2 supporting performances and the 2 lead performances that we got, the 4 acting performances that won this year, were lead. Now, you can go on the assumption that it was a co-lead if you want to do that, and I am actually doing that, but it's still a lead performance. And the reason that it kind of chaps my hide a little bit is not because I think the actors involved in this category fraud are undeserving, but because there's so many supporting performances specifically throughout the year that have minimal screen time that are not able to showcase as much to the voters of awards bodies like the Academy, because if their screen time is only 15 to 20% in the movie, they're obviously not going to have the opportunity to have as huge of an impact in their performance because it's not going to match up to the stats that I saw for these 2 winners this year in particular. Kieran Culkin was on screen 65% of the time of A Real Pain. Obviously, well over half of the movie, essentially 2/3 of the film, he's in the frame. Now, in fairness, Jesse Eisenberg, who's the other star or co-lead or would be considered lead in this universe, was on screen 69% of the time. So he was on screen a bit more than Kieran Culkin. So if you're doing technicality, you can say these are the two actors. One of them was on screen more, about 70%, and the other one was on screen 65%. So of the two, it's Jesse Eisenberg. I mean, we're talking a razor-thin margin. My point is, if you're on screen 65% of the time in your film, you're not a supporting actor. You are a lead or a co-lead in that film. Conversely, Zoe Saldana, who won supporting actress this year for playing Rita in Emilia Perez, was on screen 44% of the time in that movie, nearly half of the film, which actually I found to be surprising. But that may also be because the only thing I want to remember from Emilia Perez is the scenes with Zoe. I've blocked the rest of it out completely, so to me, she was on screen 100% of the time. However, it's still more screen time. This is where it's different than A Real Pain. It's still more screen time than the lead performance in that movie and the performance that got nominated for lead, which of course is Carla Sofia Gasson, who was on screen 39% of the time. So Zoe Saldana in this movie specifically outperformed in terms of runtime, although I think in terms of the craft too, her lead actor in Emilia Perez. Yet she was nominated in supporting and swept all season, as did Kieran Culkin, who I mentioned before, for A Real Pain. You have performances just this year in these categories that I feel like were sold short in their ability to campaign based on their performance to the Academy because they were being shadowed by lead performances that were competing in their category. I think immediately of a performance like Isabella Rossellini's in Conclave. Talk about minimal screen time. She really only has one scene in that movie where she's even speaking dialogue. And that would, of course, be her Oscar clip, without a doubt, as it was a very powerful, memorable performance that leaves an impression on you and I would assume most of the voters.
Although we sisters are supposed to be invisible, God has nevertheless given us eyes and ears.
Facial expressions and kind of physical acting that she gives throughout the film in her body language, we don't get another opportunity as a voter to say, okay, what else are we going to add to that? When you put that against Zoe Saldana, for example, every other scene, she's got the ability to do something to impress you and to add to her resume for the performance in that film. That's why I find it to be unfair. Now, my favorite performance, truth be told, in the supporting actress category this year was Ariana Grande from Wicked, and I've mentioned that literally 1,000 times on my channel. On top of that, I kept predicting her to win various awards until I eventually gave up on my dream because Zoe Saldana was sweeping, and I finally came to terms with that. But there could be an argument made there that even Ariana Grande is a co-lead, or not a supporting role for Wicked, as she plays Glinda, which is kind of a two-hander, at least in part one, with Elphaba, played by Cynthia Erivo, who is the lead. And when you're comparing the screen time and the co-lead kind of analogy, look at an actor like Yuri Borisov from Anora, which of course won big, but he was the only one that did not win. And he does have a much more minimal screen time than an actor like Kieran Culkin in his film. Yuri Borisov is very prominent in the last act of Anora, and he's kind of there the whole time, the last 30 minutes or so. But leading up to that, it's kind of sparse and few and far between. His impression is made when we get to the climax and, like I said, the final act of that film. At the end of the day, I find it disheartening. And again, it just irks me. It's just in my personal bottom three of things that kind of bother me. But if we're just allowing the movie studios and the producers and the marketing behind these films and studios push these actors into whatever category, frankly, they think they stand the best chance to win, then it just belittles, in my opinion, the awards at times. Or it could put an asterisk at a very least from people that follow award season very closely like I do, where in my mind, I know Zoe Saldana and Kieran Culkin this year were co-leads at best. And I think it just takes away from the Isabella Rossellini's and the Monica Barbaros of the world that had true supporting performances that only showed up in a handful of scenes with the express intent of having an impact in the short amount of time that they had to make that impact. And I just wish we could figure that out. And it's really all across award season, but I wish the Academy could get a hold of it and make it a little more true to what it should be, in my opinion. Sticking into my bottom three, another one that bothered the crap out of me this year is the undervaluing of some pretty objectively amazing films that were not only great and considered great by the consensus, myself included, but were in the awards discussion for quite a while. And then when it came time for those bodies to nominate their films and eventually to ultimately give the winners for the nominees, certain films were just mesmerizingly left off of nomination lists, or in some cases didn't win their respective categories. I'm thinking specifically, I'll start with Challengers, the film by Luca Guadagnino about the romantic, sexy love triangle around a game of tennis. It was a captivating sports film that brought in the elements of the thriller, the romantic drama, and was extremely sexy and taut. And this is a film with great young actors and actresses, a amazing filmmaker that has been Oscar nominated before and is having the freaking run of a lifetime right now. The guy has made an absolute greatest hits of movies, starting back with Call Me By Your Name and ending most recently with Queer, starring Daniel Craig. As you see on the screen there, the guy is like racking up in terms of bangers. So if you're talking about a collective body of work which the Academy especially loves to kind of honor, and some people could argue that Sean Baker was a benefactor of that this year, although I love Denora, so I'm not going to make that argument. But obviously they love his career trajectory, and they love what he's done for Hollywood, especially independent cinema. So you could think about Luca Guadagnino and what he's done looking at that list I showed you, and this kind of otherworldly, surrealistic viewpoints dealing with fantastical elements, maybe even horror elements at times, if you think of a movie like Bones and All. But he's still telling a human story while playing in that sandbox of those genres. But Challengers not being nominated, at a minimum, Best Editing or Best Original Score is absolutely, if the Academy should be hanging their head in shame based on the nominations that were released this year, that's the one. Original score and or editing, even if you only gave them one, but definitely both of those, I think objectively, Challengers might not have been everybody's winner, but I'm not joking you when I say if you polled all the industry professionals in Hollywood that vote on these things, Challengers was probably in every single one of those persons' top fives in those respective categories if they saw the film. If you sit down 100 editors in Hollywood and you show them Challengers, or they've seen Challengers, and you kind of survey them on it, you can't convince me. Now, if editors want to jump in my comments and tell me I'm wrong, that's fine. But I'm an editor. My daughter's an editor. I kind of know that world, and I know what to look for when I'm looking for quality editing. But you would not be able to convince me that they would not sit there and go, yeah, that's one of the at least top 5 best edited films that I've seen this year, or that I know is out there this year. And the same thing with score. It's crazy to me that the Academy seems to be going in a more progressive, new direction with certain things that may come up on this video, like genre filmmaking or international filmmaking, or even animated with the win like Flow this year, and even Boy and the Heron last year. But when it comes to music and to score, or original song even as an extension, they live in this like classical 1980s, 90s bubble. And it's just so weird to me. Like, we need to graduate, and we need to advance those categories too, to a more youthful, energetic, and frankly different path. Look, I love John Williams. I love Hans Zimmer. I absolutely adore Diane Warren, who shows up constantly in the original song category. But at the same time, there's no fresh blood there. There's no new feeling of an energetic, youthful up-and-comer in those categories lately. And it's a bummer. Reznor Ross, who have had their accolades in the past, of course, Trent Reznor from Nine Inch Nails fame, we're talking about 1990s, but he's gone on to score some tremendous films. And I'm thinking of his work with David Fincher, The Social Network, etc. And now you've got Challengers, and they also did Queer, by the way, which was also an amazing score. Where are they? Why are they not among these artists for original score? A nomination for Challengers in score was extremely deserved, and I think the industry as a whole, but especially the Academy, undervalued that film and that score this year. And I think editing falls in the same basket. Another movie that was vastly undervalued this year, and you're going to say, but it was nominated for 5 Academy Awards. It was. But I'm talking about Dune Part 2. It was also nominated for Best Picture. I get it. You're going to hit me in the comments that they didn't undervalue it because they nominated it 5 times. Okay. Generally speaking, this award season, Dune Part 2 was undervalued for the scope and the level that that film was created on. When I think of Dune Part 2 and kind of how it falls in this category that I'm talking about, the undervaluing of these films, I really think of the direction and Denis Villeneuve. How he did not receive a director nomination. I'm not even talking about a win. He didn't receive a director nomination for this one or the first one. And people do that Lord of the Rings thing, right? They do that analogy for Lord of the Rings. They're going to get him. He has the 3rd one in his trilogy coming up. Return of the King, Messiah. It's the same shit. You know, they gave him nominations. It won some techs both times. But they're not going to do Best Picture. They're not going to do Best Director. They're not going to do an acting award because all that stuff's going to come when we recognize the whole trilogy, the whole franchise, when Messiah comes out in a couple years. Well, guess what? I'm not super confident in that. I haven't read it, but I do know the story surrounding Dune Messiah, and I've heard other people talk about that story. I have a couple really, really close friends that follow Dune very closely, and they tell me, and they live this shit, and they tell me Dune Messiah, the story is not an Oscar-friendly story. Now, I'm not oblivious to the fact that, of course, Dune Messiah is going to be a technical achievement. So it's still probably going to be a player in things like sound and hopefully score, visual effects, etc. But Denis Villeneuve's direction in Dune Part 2 specifically, and really as an extension Part 1 from 2021 also, is absolutely phenomenally brilliant. And I have an eye for film, and I know this is my opinion, but when I see the direction in Dune Part 2 this year, or last year, and I see what he did in the world that he created, the scale, the scope that this film was made on, this is, in my mind, the 2 Dune films that we've gotten so far, and this is my opinion, in my mind, this is the same thing that people probably thought when they saw Star Wars in the 70s and 80s, those first couple or 3 films. It is an epic, grandiose spectacle. And to direct that, to be the leader of that creation, is not easy. And he absolutely killed it. And the undervaluing of him this season is frankly shameful. And I think that because of that, Dune Part 2 was undervalued. I know that it got its tech nominations, and I know it got the Best Picture nomination, but I also think it was undervalued even getting that because from day one, myself included, knew that it stood no shot of winning Best Picture when, frankly, it was easily among the maybe top 2 or 3 of all the movies listed in the top 10 this year. To get off my soapbox about Dune Part 2, the last movie that I think was extremely undervalued, there was actually several this year, but that I'm going to mention on this video, is Sing Sing, the Greg Quardar film starring Clarence Macklin, who did not get nominated for supporting actor. Hold that thought. And of course, the ever brilliant Coleman Domingo, who did receive his 2nd nomination back-to-back, if you count Rustin from last year, and he received a lead actor one this year for Sing Sing. You know, Sing Sing got the nomination for Coleman. It got adapted screenplay nomination, which was actually several of the inmates that helped write the screenplay, which I thought was awesome. And original song it got nominated for as well. That's an undervaluing, okay? That's 3 nominations for categories that, frankly, it couldn't win. Coleman Domingo, and frankly, nobody else stood a chance against Adrian Brody this year. In adapted screenplay, nobody stood a chance against Conclave, and even if somebody did, it was probably the adapted screenplay for Nickel Boys after a WGA victory. And then original song. El Mal was the runaway from Amelia Perez for original song. So these are nominations that were obviously amazing for these creators to receive. To be nominated for an Academy Award in a lot of ways is a win for your career, and I understand that. But at the end of the day, when you think about it, it was undervalued because this is a film that a lot of people will blame the rollout on A24. And I'm not saying that didn't have something to do with it because I actually criticized their rollout when I was trying to see it back in the fall, knowing that it was being released kind of staggered around the country. But I think collectively as a society of movie lovers, we failed Sing Sing. I think if it came to your city and thousands of people went to see it, or maybe even went to see it multiple times, tweeted about it, put it on social media, TikTok, and we embraced and championed that film. It could have been a different story in the fall leading into award season when nominations were coming out. Now, I'm not pointing fingers because I put myself in that bucket of having the finger pointed at. It should have gotten a Best Picture nomination. Clarence Macklin not being nominated for supporting actor this year. Clarence Macklin's gritty, natural, real, intimate performance from Sing Sing in a screenplay that he helped write, in a story that he lived himself. He's playing himself. He's recreating a time in his life that was tumultuous and was frankly probably hard to look back on. And he's doing that for the service of the story, the service of that film. That film, Sing Sing, made my top 5 of the year. I know it's subjective. Everybody has opinions. But from an awards-worthy filmography and thinking of what the Academy typically goes for in terms of nominations for even just Best Picture, Sing Sing was undervalued this year, in my opinion. And I think it joins the ranks of films like Dune Part 2 and like Challengers that should have gotten a lot more love this award season. And the last thing I'm going to mention in my bottom 3 that I could have done without this award season is just one phrase, one name I'm going to say: Emilia Perez. I don't even like being caught off guard with the pronunciation of it. Well, I could start there. Is it Emilia Perez or is it Emilia Perez? I don't know. I'll also tell you who doesn't know, and that's Jacques Audiard, because this is a French filmmaker, a great filmmaker, by the way, just so you know, telling a Spanish Latino story that he himself came out during award season and said that he has no frickin' idea how to represent that heritage of people. Now, of course, I'm paraphrasing, but he definitely had some questionable comments about his research and depiction of the folks in this film. When I'm talking about Emilia Perez, I've been a hater of that film. If you love Emilia Perez, I'm happy for you. That's great. I'm never going to tell you that you're wrong for liking that movie. I'm just giving you my opinion. And my opinion, and why it's on my bottom 3 here, is because it starts with the 13 nominations. I don't expect any Academy members tune into my YouTube channel, but if you do, on the off chance you're watching this segment, what are we doing? What did we do with the love and adoration that got showered upon Emilia Perez? But first of all, I already talked a little bit about the director, Audiard, and his kind of non-commitment to portraying these Latino Hispanic cultures properly, but also the trans representation that this film is supposed to promote. So Carla Sofia Gascon plays the titular Emilia Perez, which is a trans woman in the film. She transitioned from Benitez, who was a male, how she was born as a male, and is a evil, and I'm just saying, I mean, that's the character is written as such, is an evil drug lord with very weak morals, to put it lightly, who is responsible for drug addictions in their community, responsible for deaths, murders in their community, drug-related, gang-related. And this Benitez character, who lived that way for decades, I assume, wants to transition to a female, to a woman, which I support the trans community, and if you want to do that, do that. But the way it's depicted in the film, in my opinion, is very insensitive to the trans community. The film or the screenplay makes it seem like Benitez wants to transition not only to be the woman and be in the body that they think they should be living in, but also as a bit of a disguise from their criminal life. And this like despicable character of Benitez transitioning to Emilia Perez is supposed to erase the negative past and the crimes and atrocious acts that it's still the same person, that they still committed. And not only that, you can't use the trans story of redemption and finding your true self as a disguise for a worse version of yourself. It was very problematic and just felt icky to me personally. And then once they transition and they are Emilia Perez, we get a whole storyline, semi-spoilers here by the way, but we get a whole storyline where Emilia Perez wants to reconnect with Selena Gomez and their children from when they were Benitez, and they faked their death and left their family behind in shambles, devastated, had to move out of the country, and was beginning to forget about the tragedy. And then Emilia Perez tells Zoe Saldana, go get him. I want him to come live here with me, and I'm going to pretend to be basically Mrs. Doubtfire. And basically I'm using them as a pawn and a toy in my life to keep me satisfied. It was a very selfish arc for that character that I assume we were supposed to connect to as an ambassador for the trans community, but it didn't play that way for me. And then in a sick, twisted irony, Carla Sofia Gascon, the titular character who is portraying that marginalized community of the trans community, ends up being a despicable person in real life. She very much ends up being closer to the version of Benitez in the movie than the version of Emilia Perez, although both of them, in my opinion, were very unsavory characters. And that's the other thing about Emilia Perez, is the controversy. I'm not going to get into it in detail here because, frankly, I'm tired of talking about it, because when it first broke, that's all I did. Anytime it came up in terms of Oscar predictions, I always addressed the controversy and how it was going to affect the wins and this, that. I don't really want to get into the specifics, but you can find it. You could Google her name right now and you'll see screenshots of probably 50 tweets that are hateful, racist, xenophobic, and frankly shocking. I mean, we're talking about, again, I'm not going to say it. It's some rough stuff, because honestly, if I repeat some of the stuff she said in the tweets, YouTube may ban my channel. Not only am I disheartened by the hate that she was spewing, and by the way, all this was in the last 5 years, so it's not like it happened 20 years ago and she's a changed person. Maybe she's changing, that might not be fair for me to say. It was in the not too distant past is all I'm saying. But another reason why I hate that whole controversy surrounding Emilia Perez is because it's sad. It is absolutely depressing as a film fan, and not only as a film fan, but as a ally and ambassador for various marginalized communities, of which in this case, we're obviously talking about the LGBTQ community and specifically the trans community. And I feel like Carla Sofia Gascon, in her hateful rhetoric, not only hurt the film and its chances. As we saw, it only won 2 Academy Awards out of 13 noms, and those are the 2 that we basically knew it was walking in the door winning. But not only did she hurt the production itself and its chance to win more awards, but she hurt the trans story and she hurt the trans community moving forward. Her comments and what came out and what came to light after the fact hurt that community and their ability to have an impact in Hollywood going forward. Now, of course, they still will, but it just is a speed bump along the way, especially with what's going on with our current administration here in America. It is a tough time for that community. And I feel extremely sad and frankly exhausted that Emilia Perez and its star, Carla Sofia Gascon, have made things even tougher for that community. And I think that's a bummer. I really do. I don't think that was necessarily her intent when she, made those tweets, or even when she came out with the kind of half-assed apology that she gave us. But at the same time, it's a blemish on that community's progress. And for that reason, Emilia Perez is my least favorite thing. I said this was in no particular order, but in general, Emilia Perez is my least favorite thing from award season. The controversy bummed me out, and the movie getting 13 nominations, frankly, is ridiculous. It is not a film of that stature, of that magnitude. It is not on the level of James Cameron's Titanic. It is not on the level of the Godfather films. Listen to what I'm saying. Does that even sound appropriate to you? Even if you like Emilia Perez, if you know film history, do you think Emilia Perez should go down as one of the greatest films of all time in terms of Oscar notoriety? Absolutely not. So let's get on to some good stuff. I'm going to give you my top 3 moments or things from award season. Again, technically in no particular order. Let's start with the success of the substance this year. You don't have to go any further than looking at the walls behind me to know that horror is my favorite genre of film. And as an award season junkie, as an Oscar watcher for 30 years, being a horror fan does not blend with being an Oscars fan. And a lot of people talk about heartbreak year after year when it comes to the Academy Awards. For me, the heartbreak starts like in the fall every year, when the nominations and the predictions start to come out, not just for me, but from people I respect in the community. And I start to tell myself, all right, here we go again. This amazing horror performance or horror film or horror direction is not going to get recognized again. Here we go. And 9 times out of 10, and that might actually be a stat, I say like 1 every 10 years, frankly, they will recognize horror on a level that shines a spotlight on that production. This year, it was for The Substance. You would have to go back to 2017, 7 years ago, for the last time a horror-centric film got major top-of-the-line nominations, and that would be for Jordan Peele's Get Out. Of course, surprisingly receiving a Best Picture nomination back then, as well as screenplay and some other things for Jordan Peele. Now, Get Out can be categorized as horror, yes, and I know that argument's been out there, but it's in the horror genre. At a minimum, horror is one of the subgenres represented in the film. Some people will also say psychological thriller, which I also agree with. Then you go back even further. I'm going to miss some, but think about films like The Sixth Sense, which would have been in the 2000 year for the Academy Awards. Go back even further to probably the last really successful horror movie at the Academy Awards, which would have been in the 1992 Academy Awards, I think, for The Silence of the Lambs, winning multiple top-of-the-line awards, including Best Picture, and including both lead performances for Anthony Hopkins and for Jodie Foster. 1992, guys. That's 23 years ago since we've had a major top-of-the-line win for a horror film. No matter what you think of the genre, that is a long drought at the Academy Awards. But The Substance this year inserted itself into a new narrative for the Academy. At least I'm choosing to believe that. This will come to fruition and we'll have the evidence of this in the next 5 years or so. But I think it's going to be a niche in the timeline for the marriage between the Oscars and the horror genre. And the reason I say that is because all those other films I just mentioned, even going back to The Exorcist, which may be the closest, honestly, in terms of visuals to The Substance, all those other films I mentioned as examples are moody, atmospheric, scary in terms of the content, the frightening subject matter. I mentioned psychological, thriller, mystery. They all kind of fit in that sandbox while still kind of playing in the overall umbrella of the horror genre. The Substance, on the other hand, is essentially a horror comedy, I think it's safe to say. It's a dark comedy. It has satirical themes in the film that are meant to be funny but also biting subject matter, and I think it accomplished that really well. Filmmaker Coralie Farja, I've made no qualms about the fact that I think she's one of the best doing it today, along with other female filmmakers like Rose Glass or Jane Schoenbrunn. These filmmakers are bringing a new perspective to a genre that I love so much. And The Substance, if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't seen it, I'm not going to spoil specific plot details, but I will just tell you that it is a batshit, psychotic, psychosexual, insane bloodbath in the 97-year history of the Oscars. This type of film has never been touched by the Academy. Not only has it never been touched, it's never even been in their realm of knowing that it exists. So when The Substance burst on the scene this award season, after his success at the Cannes Film Festival, I was hopeful. But even I, who starts doing predictions in August, September, kept an actress like Demi Moore out of the top 5 for the acting nominees because I thought to myself, I've done this for 30 years. I know they're not going to recognize this performance. It's amazing. She's Demi Moore. This is the mirror scene alone that we've seen in 1,000 clips is enough to get her nominated, but they're not going to do it. And I kept her right there at my number 6. If you go back and look at some of my predictions from September, October, November, she was always there, but I was never hopeful enough to put her into the 5 nominees because of the horror bias that exists with the Academy. She proved me wrong. Coralie Farja proved me wrong. And the production of The Substance proved me wrong. It got major Academy Award nominations this year. It won for Best Makeup, which, by the way, was extremely deserved. If you've seen that film, you know what I mean. It got nominated for Best Picture. It got nominated for Best Screenplay, Best Director, female director, by the way, which is another thing the Academy, they've done okay the last few years, but let's be honest, it's not something they're rushing to do when it comes to nominating females. And Demi Moore, who had one of the strongest, most appetizing narratives that I've ever remember even seeing for an Academy Award nominee this year, gave a brilliant performance that was not only insane, just like the movie, but it was a very intimate, personal portrayal of this character named Elizabeth Sparkle that in a lot of ways people think mirrors or parallels Demi Moore's own career and own life in Hollywood. And it is a film about aging out in the public eye and aging out in your celebrity. Her character in the movie was doing it. She technically is going through that right now as we speak, at 62 years old. And the performance was celebrated across the board this award season. She won basically everything, with the exception, of course, of the Academy Awards the other night and the BAFTAs, which is the British Academy Awards, essentially. But she won the Screen Actors Guild Award, an award given to her by her peers, which frankly probably meant the world to her after being in this business for nearly 50 years, and before this year, not really receiving any accolades for it. In fact, receiving more Razzie wins than actual award circuit wins, which is frankly just a sad state of affairs. She was also recognized for the Critics' Choice win for actress. And she gave the best speech that I heard this entire award season when she won the Golden Globe for The Substance as Elizabeth Sparkle for lead acting. And at that moment in time, I had a tear in my eye and a flutter in my heart as a horror fan, because a horror performance in an insane, bloody, gory body horror film was on the stage with a Golden Globe in her hand. And the speech that she gave to this day affects me.
30 years ago, I had a producer tell me that I was a popcorn actress. And at that time, I made that mean that this wasn't something that I was allowed to have, that I could do movies that were successful, that made a lot of money, but that I couldn't be acknowledged. And I bought in, and I believed that. And that corroded me over time to the point where I thought a few years ago that maybe this was it. Maybe I was complete. Maybe I've done what I was supposed to do. And as I was at kind of a low point, I had this magical, bold, courageous, out of the box, absolutely bonkers script come across my desk called The Substance. And the universe told me that you're not done. And
I commend Demi Moore and her run this year. I know that I predicted Mikey Madison to win that award at the Oscars, and if you follow this channel, you know that. I stuck with Mikey. Her and Demi Moore and Fernanda Torres, who was in I'm Still Here, which was also a nominee and lead actress, were 3 of my top 5 performances of the year, period. And they were all in the running. I loved all of them equally. I predicted Mikey, but I tipped my hat to Demi Moore and what she did this year, not only for herself and for lifting up the work that she did in this Farja movie, but what she did for the horror genre is immeasurable. And that's the win for her this year. And that's the win for me and all of us, is genre filmmaking and the wave that is coming through the Academy. It started with, maybe not started with, but in recent years, this changeover when they expanded their membership. Parasite, right? Winning was strange to people at the time. Some people thought it was a possibility, but it was strange. It was an upset. It was a left field win for what the Academy typically does. You go on a little bit, a couple more years. Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. Guys, I love that movie. That's a sci-fi multiverse film with basically an all-Asian cast fighting each other in dreamlike, fantastical settings with dildos. Say what you will, that won Best Picture. But The Substance and the success that that film had this year and the giant step forward for the horror genre, I'm going to have my eye on the Academy and what they do going forward with not only these movies that are gory, bloody, maybe even a slasher gets a major nomination, but I think Demi Moore and The Substance have done something for us this year that's going to make a huge difference going forward, and I salute it. I didn't really know how to categorize this because it's a lot of stuff, but I'm just going to say I'm Still Here, the Brazilian passion and the international impact. That is one of my favorite things from this award season. I went on a podcast recently as a guest, and I talked about the Academy Awards and kind of how things played out there, some of my favorite things from the ceremony, and without a doubt, 100%, my favorite win on the night was I'm Still Here, winning for International Feature and defeating, frankly, the favorite in that category, Emilia Perez, which, if you heard the first half of this video, you're not surprised that I'm excited about.
And the Oscar goes to I'm Still Here, Brazil.
But what I was talking about on that episode with my buddies, and what really fascinated me about the movie's kind of rise into the awards discussion this year, was the passion of essentially an entire country around a film. And I said to them, and I posed the question to them, what would it take for America to embrace a film or a work of art or whatever to the level that Brazil embraced I'm Still Here this year? I don't think it would happen. I think the American culture takes Hollywood productions, takes the movies, frankly takes the arts for granted. Now, of course, not everybody. I'm speaking on a blanket terminology. In general, I think we take those things for granted. Even as recently as the Oscar ceremony, to see different gatherings at the carnival that was taking place in Rio in Brazil, and to see thousands of people gathered with the Oscars playing on a big screen or on the wall at the side of buildings down the parade route so that they could see either Fernando Torres win or the film win was so emotional for me. I'm not from Brazil. I don't even speak the language. I love the folks that have flooded my channel this award season, that have hit me in the comments, that have appreciated what I've been doing on this channel, not just in terms of I'm Still Here, but in terms of my love of films, my passion for the genres. I feel embraced by that community, and I feel that they have something, and I'm talking about Brazil specifically, although this could extend to other international viewerships as well, because you think of Flo from Latvia. That's another country that has wholly embraced that project and feels a sense of pride for it. But in sticking with Brazil in this comment, they have something, and I can't put my finger on it, but the pride and the emotional attachment that they have to this story, and I'm Still Here, that Walter Salles adapted from a memoir telling the true events around the military dictatorship in the early 1970s, they have an attachment to it because it's their history, right? And they lived through it. They survived it in many ways. And not only that, there's an added layer to it, because then you have an actress like Fernanda Torres who's adored there. You know, she's probably our Julia Roberts here in America. I mean, you know, I'm using that as an analogy. I really don't know what she would be compared to, but she's just adored there. She's lifted up there in the community, in the arts community there, film, TV, whatever. Not only that, her mother, Fernanda Montenegro, even maybe more so when you go back to an Academy Award film, Central Station. That, frankly, is one of the biggest, most egregious losses in Academy history, that she lost that award to Shakespeare in Love's Gwyneth Paltrow. Look, I don't hate on Gwyneth Paltrow, but that was a Harvey Weinstein-funded victory for that film. And if you look at the two performances next to each other, Montenegro will shake you to your core, while Gwyneth Paltrow might make you chuckle occasionally, and it's kind of whimsical. It's not a bad performance by any means, but what are we doing here? I mean, look at the two next to each other. So fast forward ahead to I'm Still Here and the success that film had. But what just really captivates me is the embracing of the film and of the Oscars kind of legacy and the whole pageantry that we put on here around the Academy Awards and as an extension award season. They embraced it and they wanted to be a part of it because their culture was now being represented. They could see themselves in this kind of outlandish awards thing that we put on every year. Now, to the Academy's credit, they have been kind of incorporating more international flair year after year after year. I mentioned Parasite before, and that was really when it kind of got ramped up a little bit. And there was 2 international films in the Best Picture race this year, even though one of them I don't really want to talk about again. And then I'm Still Here, of course. Last year you had The Zone of Interest and Anatomy of a Fall, 2 international films in Best Picture. Absolutely, without a doubt, one of my favorite things this award season was seeing Brazil embrace this project and by extension embrace the way that America does award season and the way we go through it. They've been with me since the beginning. I can only speak about my own channel, but when I saw I'm Still Here back in November, I put Fernanda Torres in my predictions really early on. In fact, I hadn't even seen her at that point in a lot of folks' predictions. And I had her down towards the bottom, like 9 or 10, in fairness, I'll just tell you. And then as the season kind of went on and we went through December, and definitely when she got the Globe nomination, and of course when she got the Globe win, because the Globe drama win almost always crosses over to an Oscar nomination, she was there. She was in it. She was in the mix, especially when we were leading up to that Golden Globes era. And I'm so glad she won the Golden Globe. Brazil has that now. They have it. She's got that award. She has the notoriety for this amazing performance. And I love that too, of course, that it got the notoriety that it got and that it won international feature. But more so what I'm naming here is just how these countries, of which I think Brazil is probably top in this category this year, but several countries just embracing these products, just embracing this piece of art. This is ours. Thank you for recognizing it. Thank you for speaking about it. Thank you for getting the word out there for other people to see it. And literally, I have 1,000 comments saying things just like that. And that's just on my channel, which is not a huge channel, by the way. And I'm sure a lot of my other YouTubers and film critics have seen similar comments from Brazilians. They were extremely passionate about this project, I'm Still Here. And they put a lot of pride and emotion into shouting that film out all award season. And they really carried it. I think the passion behind that film, maybe coupled with the controversy around Emilia Perez, but namely the passion around that film and the Golden Globe success really pushed it to an international win. And I think that it's huge because we were already seeing the international wave with the Academy specifically. And I think the success of I'm Still Here and these smaller countries embracing those projects when they get the notoriety they deserve on the Hollywood stage is going to lend to even more international influence when you're talking about performances or technical categories. And of course, picture going forward. I mentioned flow. I want to talk about that one too real quickly. Latvia, even a smaller country than Brazil. I've seen videos of people rounding multiple blocks to see the movie Flow in Latvia because they wanted to be a part of what was happening. They wanted to know what their country was being represented as here in America and at the Oscars and other award shows too, of course. And that, it really, really makes me emotional. And like I said before, I'm not Brazilian. I'm not Latvian. I don't have any family members in those countries. It makes me emotional because that's the power of cinema. And you see it. And I feel like America had it. We had it. You think about the golden age of Hollywood. You do. Or at least I do when I think of movie history. We had that at some point, and we've become numb to it in this country. And this is just my opinion. I'm not even saying me personally, but just the general population around movie watching. Whether you're talking about the streaming influence now, the cinema experiences, you can say whatever you want, but it's not what it used to be, even as near back as like 10 years ago. And I think that the passion that Brazil and Latvia specifically, and other international films that were in the mix too, had behind their films is something that I wish we had here. and I think we did have at one point. But it's extremely encouraging for the makeup of the Academy going forward, because America is not the only country making movies. And we've got to get out of the tunnel vision of only focusing on the stuff that's right here on our doorstep, because, you know, you've heard amazing filmmakers like Bong Joon-ho, like Guillermo del Toro, you know, talk about the subtitles in films and talk about how Americans are like afraid to try to connect to these other cultures. And that's a shame. But I think that I'm Still Here this year specifically, and other movies like Flow and All We Imagine Is Light, Seed of the Sacred Fig from Germany, all these types of films, one of my favorites, Evil Does Not Exist, are going to be something we can look back on to see how much more international the nominations end up being 5 or even 10 years from now. And I commend Brazil, I commend Latvia. You guys have made this award season so precious for me as a fan to see a population rise up. And I've said that jokingly on my channel before, but you guys rose up and you showed your love for a film, yes, but you showed a love for your culture and your history and how it belongs and it should have a place in our history here in America, specifically at the Oscars. And now it does, because it won International Feature this year. You're damn right. And in wrapping up this video, the only other thing that would be among my favorites this season is Timothée Chalamet, plain and simple. You guys know I love Timmy. I'm borderline a stan of that dude. And I was pulling for him all season. Now, he did get the Screen Actors Guild Award, which was huge. And that was also a highlight that I'll kind of put in this package. But overall, it's just Timmy existing this award season is frankly one of my favorite things, if not my favorite. Whether you're talking about his multiple podcast performances that he had this year, he went on Theo Von, he went on Nardwuar, which was fucking unbelievable, and gave us actually one of my favorite gifts of all time that we got this year from Timmy. He dressed as Bob Dylan and he went to various screenings of A Complete Unknown. He took Beyblades with him to international screenings of the film and would play Beyblades with fans outside of the theater. He did things like going on College Game Day, not only being a guest on College Game Day, which is centered around college football for those that don't know, but dropping mad knowledge as if he was one of the commentators that had been doing it for decades.
I'm going Jackson State, 8 wins in a row, 11 all-conference players. This should be a comfortable, easy win for them. Breaking it down. Yeah.
He showed up on Saturday Night Live and gave one of the more memorable hosting gigs this year, even poking fun at himself for being nominated multiple times without a win at shows like the Oscars.
And each time, it gets harder to pretend it doesn't sting. Let's take a look.
And the winner is Gary Oldman.
Gary Oldman for The Darkest Hour.
Gary Oldman.
Mahershala Ali for Green Book.
Mahershala Ali.
Man, just another lonely night with my Dune popcorn bucket.
The guy was out there, and the whole time he was out there on the circuit, yes, he was campaigning. Yes, he wanted to be in the public eye. As we know from his SAG speech when he won, he wants to be the greatest. So you would only imagine that, of course, he wanted to win the Academy Award this year, or frankly, every year that he's in a film, he probably wants to win it. And I think that an actor needs that drive, needs that hunger. Some people saw it as conceited or arrogant or pretentious, the speech, I mean. I didn't see it that way. I saw it as him speaking his truth. And what I said when I talked about that speech in my SAG reflection, if you're a movie fan, if you follow movies year after year after year like I do on this channel, you want Timothée Chalamet to be in the movies you're watching, because he is going to do the best that he can do in his portrayal of the characters that he's playing. He is going to give way above and beyond what he frankly needs to give, especially with the name that he has now. He could turn in the next 50 performances, make millions of dollars and be fine. But he's going to give a performance that he wants to win an Oscar for. And I think that if you're a movie fan, you should appreciate that. You should want every actor that's in every movie, at least dramatically, that you watch to do what he's doing. You should want all of them to be the greatest, because then you're going to get a movie full of performances that are going to blow your fucking mind. He's one of the best young actors doing it right now. I think his performance in A Complete Unknown really showed the majority of the world that, even though I already knew that. I don't know that most people did. But now I hope they're sitting up and taking notice. He's going to be in Marty Supreme this year, which is going to be on my On the Radar video that I do in about a month of performances and movies to look out for next award season. So he could be back as early as 10 months from now with Academy Award nominations, and I think he will be. Timothée Chalamet and his presence on the awards circuit this year brought me so much joy. Not only because I loved his performance in A Complete Unknown and because I wanted people to take notice of his nomination and possible win, but just because he was hilarious and he was charismatic. He was an every guy's guy. Women want him. Dudes want to hang out with him. You know, my young kids love him. I mean, he is just a great public figure. Obviously, dating Kylie Jenner, so there's a huge paparazzi focus on that. But all of that seems to be taken in stride. And, the greatest speech or whatever rubs some people the wrong way. I just explained to you why I think it's completely fine and warranted. But otherwise, it doesn't seem to be getting to his head. It definitely doesn't seem to be affecting his work on camera. I love this guy. And I cannot wait until he's on the Oscar stage being recognized for whatever amazing performance that blows us away. I just hope it's not a 22-year waiting room stand for him like it was for Leonardo DiCaprio. His first nomination was for What's Eating Gilbert Grape, which frankly he should have won for that. All the way to The Revenant, which honestly he should not have won for. It was not the best performance that year. But they eventually said, we got to give Leo an award. It's been 22 years. The guy's, sleeping with bears in the woods. And they gave him one. I hope Timothée doesn't have to wait that long, but his existence and presence on the awards circuit this year is easily one of my favorite and most enjoyable things from this award season. So there you have it. I don't know how I'm going to have it cut out for myself when I try to edit this down because I got off on tangents a little bit there. So if you're watching the edited version of this video, hopefully it didn't bore you too much. But those were 3 of my least favorite things and 3 of my favorite things from award season. The very last thing that I'm going to do on this channel for the 2024-25 award season to kind of say goodbye to it is my podcast episode this week, which will also be here on YouTube in a video format where we just wrap up the Oscar ceremony. I'm going to have a special guest on and we're going to talk about all the highs and lows of the show, who won, who missed, what surprises we ran into, Conan's hosting gig, the James Bond thing, Adrian Brody's speech that I think is still going on. I've asked someone to take him some water to keep him hydrated. But we will talk about all that on this week's podcast episode. But for now, that was my top 3, bottom 3 from award season. I want to know down in the comments, what was your number 1 favorite thing from award season? Just tell me that. I'm going to pin it in the comments. It could be a speech. It could be an award that somebody won. It could be a film that got lifted up. It could be like I had Timmy, doing interviews on podcasts as one of my favorite things. What was your favorite thing from award season? Let me know down below. And what are you looking forward to, man? We got to leave this behind. Like I said, one more. I'm going to do one more thing. One more hour I'm going to do on my podcast. And then that's it. And then we're on to the 25-26 award season. You guys have been the best. You have made this so fulfilling for me this year. Honestly, if you're watching this video, if you clicked on it, I love you. I hope you subscribed. If you already were subscribed and you clicked on it, you know what I'm talking about. I love movies. I love talking about them. I love award season. You guys have made this just so incredible for me. And I really appreciate it. I hope you stick around because this channel is going to be dedicated to movies. And we're going to, believe me, before you know it, and definitely before I know it, next award season is going to be here. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you guys soon in the garage.